Good morning, everyone. Hi there. My name is Carrie Ramsey, and welcome back to another weekend workshop. Today, we are hearing from Seema Dhanoa, and this is all about a conscious leadership for women, which allows us to make clearer decisions in a complex world. I'm sure that you know exactly what that is all about as business owners, as women in business, professional women. So, welcome. We are so thrilled to have you as a part of this workshop today. In fact, I would love to give you the opportunity to get to know each other in the Zoom chat today. Why don't you go ahead, drop a little note if you'd like about what your business is, where you're connecting from in the world. If you have a link and you would like to include that, this is a great opportunity not only to learn, but to connect with others as well. So while you are doing that, I'll acknowledge that Queen's University is situated on the ancestral territory of the Huron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. And I was just doing some reading recently about Indigenous business because we have so many of our clients in WeCan who are Indigenous business owners. And what I learned is that there are approximately 3,500 Indigenous owned businesses here in Ontario, which is where Queen's University is situated. As well, about 35% of all Indigenous businesses in Canada are located in Ontario. And finally, just a fun fact, and that is that Indigenous businesses in Canada are being created at a rate of 9 times the national average, which for me is a lot of fun since I'm the project manager here at WeCan, and so many of our clients are Indigenous women. So I thought I'd just share some fun facts with you today as we start off today's presentation with our land acknowledgement. So, Seema, you and I met back, I think it was in November in Toronto, at which time I got a copy of Seema's book, which is called, I know it's a little bit blurry here, The Path to Conscious Leadership. 5 steps to better decisions and results. And I'm going to be putting a link to that in the Zoom chat in case anyone wants to check it out. At that point, Seema and I realized that we were the same corner of the world. And I said, you know what? We would love to have you involved with WeCan. And here we are today, where she is presenting to us on this topic that I know she is not only very skilled and knowledgeable about, but very passionate about. So, Seema, welcome. I'm going to hand you the virtual microphone. Thank you so much for being a part of today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Carrie. So I'll just start off with like a very brief introduction with myself, and I'm having challenges moving to the next slide.
If you use your
There
sometimes
we go.
on
I'm
your
going to have to
okay
use my
your
mouse.
keyboard sometimes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So thank you for that, Carrie. So just a little bit about me. I know that my bio is there, but I've done a lot of work in business transformation, implementing large technologies, and a lot of work around enabling change and with people and being able to do that differently. I also have specialized expertise in business models that create social impact. So not just being a for-profit business, but to make a real impact in the environment, around the community, and to create those social outcomes as well. So today, what we're going to be talking about is conscious leadership and how we can use other parts of ourselves to elevate our consciousness. So we will be talking about the mind and what are some of those common mental traps that affect our day-to-day decision making. We'll talk about what consciousness is, and I will go through the 5 pillars of conscious leadership that I've developed. And yeah, so you'll get an understanding of what are exactly our emotions and intuition, and how does that work in the decision-making process, and then how we can, as a result of that, make much better decisions. And so, just a question to the group, and you can feel free to chime in, is that what do you think affects our decision making? Just, what are some of those things that you believe play a role? You can pop anything into the chat if you like.
So Christina has says feelings. When
Mhm.
it, feelings, we have Manuela says data. Brooke says budget. Rebecca says sleep. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Stacy says previous experiences.
Mm.
Sunita says our own values, beliefs, and maybe biases.
Mhm.
Ashita says being able to listen to external, but trusting and acting on internal. Great thoughts.
Wonderful, wonderful. Exactly. So typically, we tend to believe decisions are based on external things, right? So, you have your data, you have your information, you might be looking at a bunch of options, what you did in the past, and of course, time factors, budget factors, and we use that to make decisions. But really, decision making is everything that's going on the internal. So even though we're using those pieces of information, it really is about your perception. It's about your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions in that moment, which is actually how the decision-making process works. And so this is something we don't really talk about when we are in moments when we are making decisions, whether it's for a business, our businesses, or it's for your personal life. And so that really kind of, makes us we should be asking the question, what are we actually paying attention to when we are making decisions? Because if we're not aware of these like internal factors, then we really rely on habitual decision making, and it's like how we've made decisions before and the way we made that decision, we're just going to repeat that. And but there's a problem with that because whatever we do that's so habitual, it is actually pulling us into our mind, just into our brain. And that's where a lot of mental errors can happen. So there are a lot of mental traps that we can fall prone to. So I'm just going to go over some of these, and because it's really important that we get like a feel for the things that can happen. So so we tend to make judgments all the time, really quick judgments. These are often rules of thumb, and it just helps us to process information a lot faster. And we need to be able to do that. Otherwise, it's too much in the moment. So often we compare similarity of things or events and we assume that the same is going to occur. So we tend to overestimate the likelihood. We also do estimates based on, the first piece of information that comes to mind. We'll rely on that without questioning it. And then we also estimate value based on some starting point. And once again, that starting point just comes in without any sort of evaluation, and decisions are made on that. And business people tend to do that a lot. And they think they're relying on their experience, and that's where it's coming from. We also have a lot of cognitive biases. There's 180 of them, which is a lot. And so there's just a few here that I wanted to highlight. And I think one of the common ones that we all fall prone to is confirmation bias. So this is looking for information and searching for it that supports our values and beliefs. And what we'll do is like we'll discount any information that doesn't fit that, or we actually tend to ignore it. Then there's actor observer bias. So this is where things that go in our life, like say if you're late on a deadline or something like that, and we tend to blame external factors. Maybe it's with your business that's struggling, it's the economy, so it's external factors. But when we look at other people, we tend to associate them with their own internal, you know, things. So, for example, you might say, yeah, that person's late on their deadlines because they don't know good time management. And so that tends to happen a lot in workplaces. And sunk cost fallacy. So, once again, business people fall very much into this trap of like committing to and sticking with actions when you know that later on the outcomes aren't going to be good. So, this usually happens because of money already invested, time already invested. So, you keep chugging along when the best thing to do is actually stop. And then we have unconscious biases. So you probably have heard this terminology before, but really what's going on here is that in the unconscious part of the mind, the brain tags and stores information, and it's basically like patterns and associations, and it's so that we can make quick judgments about people and situations. Really, it's a safety mechanism, but unfortunately, that safety mechanism is there all the time, and we tend to be biased. So our brain will just adopt whatever that suggestion is. So when you meet people, that part of the mind is saying in group or out group. So when you meet people, automatically you'll be like, no, this person isn't like me. That person is like me, but that's happening all in the unconscious. So sometimes you might not just like someone. You're like, I don't know why I don't like this person. Well, it's because there's something you're not relating or connecting with them because you don't think they're like you. And then we have cognitive distortion. So, cognitive distortions are really mistakes we make when we're understanding reality. And this is usually like really faulty thinking. So, for example, overgeneralizing. So, if you made a mistake once, say if you made a mistake in your business and it was a project that didn't go well, so you just assume like every project I'm going to do is going to fail. There's catastrophizing. So, overblowing some very negative situation that will never happen. Like if I get on the plane, it's going to crash, for example. Then there's personalizing. So taking responsibility for things that's absolutely outside of your control. So, for example, you show up to a meeting, you're late, and as a result of that, you think the meeting was horrible and it's all your fault. Then there's also labeling. So this is applying general labels to yourself or when you meet others. So for example, like say if you in your business you forget to do something and to other people you say, "Oh, I'm such an idiot." And then there's filtering, which this tends to happen a lot for people, and it's like focusing on negative things in a situation or event and ignoring all the positive. So it becomes a really big distortion. And of course, there's some other distortions as well, such as like blame, being able to jump to conclusions, thinking that you're right. So these are all actual, problems or traps that present in our mind that we don't really think about, and we actually, fall into that. And so, if we think about, sorry, I think I missed a slide here. So what we have to think about is like the unconscious part of our mind and, what is actually causing all of this. And so just to go over this, the unconscious mind is, you can understand it in a way that it's runs on automatic. It is the fast, we're not aware of it. Um, it's always in the driver's seat, which is something that we generally don't think about. And then we have system two, which is the slower, more deliberate part of self. And this is what we identify with. These are our conscious thoughts, and this is where we think we are all the time. But in fact, it's system one that's usually in the driver's seat and making constant suggestions to system two, and we just adopt it. So these theories were developed by Daniel Kahneman, which was a really great psychologist that developed this. So now the thing is, if we're not aware, that we're not conscious and deliberately thinking, slowing down our thinking, and being in system two, system one is the default because our brain likes to conserve energy and we like to coast. We like to do what's easy. So this is sliding into the comfortable, doing what you always do. And so that is, as leaders and business folks, this is something that's going on for you like every day, all the time. And so the way that we can combat these sort of mental errors and traps is like there's a few things here that we have to realize and understand, and we'll delve a little bit more into this when we talk about consciousness. And that is that perception is not reality. So whatever you think is going on in the moment may not be actual reality. And there isn't one reality. We're all experiencing life in our own way. We need to have awareness when we're using those rules of thumb. So when we're trying to make quick decisions and quick judgments, we actually need to be aware when we're doing that, because that simple act will actually stop the brain from doing those automatic judgments. And then, of course, collective thinking is much greater than individual thinking. So anytime that you can surround yourself with people, that you can bounce ideas off, you can engage in dialogue, will expand, the quality of your thinking and what you actually decide. Clearing your mind of mental clutter, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and also bringing attention to how you're thinking and feeling. Once again, it's being deliberate to understand what's happening in the moment. We also need to be able to question ourselves, and we don't tend to do this a lot. And the reason why we do is that we have really, really deeply held beliefs that are stored in our unconscious mind. And a lot of these deeply held beliefs develop from the age of 0 to 7. And so that is when we are a sponge and it gets embedded. So it's very important that we learn to question ourselves and sort of get underneath that iceberg. So I'll just take a pause here and just to see if anyone has any comments or any questions that's arising for them.
Yeah, any muddy points, anything that maybe, because this is a lot of information, a lot of good information. I love how you were structuring even that unconscious bias, which is so key to discuss as well. Any thoughts? Because I know we also have some leadership experts in the group as well. What if you'd like to weigh in or have a question, please go ahead, put it in the chat or give us a reaction button and we'll take a look. Otherwise, we'll move on. Pause for effect. All right.
Okay.
I think we're taking it in, but if someone is in the midst of typing, we'll catch it in another few minutes. Go ahead. Oh,
Okay,
sorry,
great.
we do have one question. Ashita is asking, what is the best way to clear your mind?
Yes, so we will get right into that when I start going through the pillars. So we
Great.
can definitely delve into that.
And Sunita, you have a question as well or a comment?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering a little bit on how collective thinking is more, I
Mhm.
think more powerful than individual thinking. Because if you are with like-minded individuals,
Mhm.
sameness begets sameness, then I think that collective group thinking can be more detrimental as well. Just.
So very good observation. So when we're in a group together, so one key thing is that we are social beings. And so when we are in a room with people together and we're having a conversation, the parts of our brain that activate for learning become engaged. And so that actually stimulates our mind, and we're actually able to have more new ideas come out because we're not just relying on the thinking patterns that are in our unconscious mind, right? So everything is patterned, everything is habitual. But when we're engaging in conversation and a discussion, consider it like novelty. Anytime the brain thinks that there's novelty, it engages, right? But in a group setting, what we have to be mindful of is the bias that you pointed out. So it's one of the cognitive biases, and that's groupthink. And so this happens because of social pressures. Sometimes people don't want to look like the odd one out, so they don't want to share their voice. They don't want to ruffle feathers and share their point of view and tend to go along and with others, right? And so that's when groupthink is not good because we don't end up with the right things. And the way that I have combated groupthink before is that when I'm running a meeting or say a session, a strategy session or something like that, I basically with the group create how do we our principles of how we want to show up today. And it's very simple as like people will share how they want to show up. They'll say that, for this meeting, we want to hear everyone's voice. In this meeting, we want to be able to, identify all of our assumptions. So those are some small but powerful mechanisms that can really elevate people in the room not to fall into groupthink. And of course, there is that, I'll just briefly say there is that culture component where we need leaders to lead by example and to encourage diversity of thought, right? Everyone has something powerful to contribute. There is not one expert. Everyone comes with their talents and abilities, and we need to leverage everyone's special, things that are with who they are, right? And
Love
so
that. Great question, Sunita.
yes, excellent. I love that as well. So I'm going to now ask all of you a question, and that is, what is consciousness? So if you could just take a moment and just write down whatever comes to you.
I'll read some of the answers. I know some people are writing it, I'm sure, in their own notebooks. Some people are sharing the Zoom chat. If you'd like to share in the Zoom chat, that's great. And it's funny, Brooke and Ishita, I think it was, came up with the same word for me, which was awareness. So being aware, being intentional. Claire says thought patterns that you're aware of. Stacy says being present. Sunita says active presence. Manuela also says awareness.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, all of you, all of those components is what consciousness is. So very simply, what we can think about it as it's like awareness of your total experience with all parts of yourself. So that is a way that we can think about what consciousness is. Now, there are a lot of sort of different takes on consciousness from spiritual, from religious, scientific, philosophical. And so, what I wanted to do was just sort of take all of that complexity and distill it down. So, I created a definition, which I put in my book, that consciousness comes from the brain, body, feelings, and intuition interacting in that moment to moment experience. And it's awareness of that subjective experience that's always informed by our unconscious and conscious interpretation. So that is a very like fully loaded definition, I realize, but I wanted to make sure it encompasses many very important things. So firstly, I think, therefore I am, that philosopher in the 17th century that said that, that's not true. So it's like we have many parts of ourselves, which is all a part of our consciousness. But I think, therefore I am, from the 17th century onward, is how we got so stuck in our head. You know, it's like during the Greek philosophers in that time, they believed that consciousness and the seat of the soul was in the heart. So that was a big change that happened that's influenced where we are today. The other point that I wanted to just raise here is awareness of subjective. So, I already touched on this before, meaning that reality is not fixed. It's not as we are experiencing it. This is everything that we experience is just facets of reality. It's points of view, and we'll never be able to perceive everything at once. It's just too much. And that's important for us to keep in mind because, you know, because otherwise, like we just end up running on the automatic patterns. And that's how a lot of those mental errors can result. So that's what we have to do. We have to learn how to shift our awareness. And it's really why I created, this book and this work that I'm doing in conscious leadership. Because if we look at the way businesses are being run, the way communities or societies are being run, it's actually all based on the past, old patterns. And it's as a result of people because we're not elevating our consciousness. So we're just creating what's already been done before. And obviously, it's not working. We have so many problems and issues that go on around the world. And it is a result of us, it's a result of our consciousness. It reflects directly into the world. And so, conscious leadership, if we take our understanding of consciousness and think about it in the context of leadership, it is leading by being present. Sunita said, active presence, aligning our thoughts, emotion, and intuition and our body. That's all parts of ourselves. And we're bringing that into our day to day and how we show up as leaders. And so I've developed 5 pillars of like, okay, how do we lead more consciously? Like, how do we use this other intelligence that we have and not get trapped in our mind? And so there's 5 pillars here, which I will be walking us through. So be present, become heart-centered. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that today, just so we really understand emotions, feelings, and how does heart intelligence actually come into the way that we make decisions, stay interconnected, feel the future, and think with abundance. And so, this first pillar, which many of you said consciousness is being present. And so, when we're present, our attention is in the moment. So, we're bringing our complete self in that experience. Now, the thing is, we live in a world and we live in an environment where there's so many distractions. It's so easy to break your attention. And because our attention is so easily broken, basically, whatever you give attention to is what becomes. That's where all of the mental resources, everything directs towards that. Also, your energy. So just kind of hold that in your mind, and we'll dig into that a little bit more. But when you're present, your mind is free of mental clutter. So that question came up. So, so our mind is very active. There's about 60 to 70,000 thoughts that we process in a day. And there's also a study that showed that about 80% of that can be negative, which is like really alarming, that can happen. Now, the problem with that is that those sort of like negative thoughts or repetitive thoughts, the brain just repeats it because there's neural structure, neural pathways that have been created, and it just happens so quickly. And we're like, oh, we can't control our thoughts, or I can't focus on what I'm doing. Mental clutter builds up when we have too much going on for ourselves. We're overloaded. Mental clutter results because your attention is actually a limited capacity, but we act like our attention is unlimited. Your attention is actually the most precious and greatest resource that you actually have as a person, as a leader. And and when we're not focused, on social media, too many messages coming in, too many pings coming in, there's too much in the brain to process. So your brain's resources are actually getting diluted. And that's how the clutter builds up. And I will talk a little bit more about how we can free up that. Attachments. So when we get too focused on certain ideas, and have a fixed point of view, that really limits what we can see. And that can be really challenging, for leading your business. If you're like, nope, this is what I want, this is what I want to do, your brain will filter and ignore everything else. And the next part here is like managing mind wandering. So as I said, we've got a lot of thoughts in our mind, but when the mind is not engaged and it's bored, it'll just occupy itself with more interesting things. So maybe you're thinking about that vacation you took 5 years ago. Maybe you're thinking about some memory in the past. Maybe you're doing what ifs, these like hypothetical situations that actually may never happen. And so mind wandering also uses up your brain capacity, and it also is like a contributor to mental clutter. And then, of course, we have the mental narrator. So this is that voice in your head, okay? So it's the voice that you wake up with, as you're getting dressed, ready, making breakfast. It's the one that chimes all along with you during the day. And that mental narrator and all of these elements is actually what takes us out of being present. So, which leads us to, you know, how we can actually free up our mind and be able to learn how to be present in the moment. So, I'm just wondering, if any of you have certain practices that you follow just to be more present every day.
That's a great one. I'd love to see where people are sharing. I'll share mine, which is the picture you have in front right there, which is walking in nature. That is one of the biggest ones for me. Manuela says meditation. Rebecca says meditation. Baron says mindfulness, meditation. Ashita says breathing. Stacy says exercise. Yeah, all good ones.
Excellent. So, yeah, so being present it's hard for us to be present like every single minute of the day, but we can strive to be as present as much as possible. And all of those ideas that were put in the chat are excellent, right? Being able to meditate, breath work, it basically helps our attention focus and clear out all of the noise in our mind. Um, Also, we can avoid rumination. So, this is when we obsess over something and we keep replaying it in our mind over and over and over again. It just is a waste. And it actually creates that negative habitual thinking. And when we keep scrolling on social media, that's also considered rumination as well. Because even if you occupy your mind with something totally different, that you just are ignoring something or not dealing with something, it also takes you out of being present. You can set an intention for the day, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit, about how that can really help our mind and ourselves throughout the day. And avoid multitasking. So multitasking isn't real. Some of you might have heard that. It's actually a myth. What we actually do is task switching. And we do it so quickly and seamlessly that we feel like we're multitasking. But when you multitask, your brain is still processing one activity that you're doing and then is processing the next. That also leads to mental clutter and can make you make more mistakes and easily distracted. And I think what's key here is that, whenever we are matching our actions to our thoughts, we are present. Gardening, golfing, going for a walk, observing nature. All of those things, when the body and the mind match, it helps us to be present. And so that could be through running, exercise, all of those are wonderful things. And I think with being present, it's just a simple practice that whenever you notice, oh, I'm not present, oh, my mind just wandered, just gently bring yourself back. And so you don't have to be hard on yourself. It's a very just gentle practice that we can do. And just wondering if there's any like questions before we move on about being present.
Pause, be in the moment, be present, and see if you have any questions. Check in with yourself.
Yes.
There was some other comments here about to answer your questions, leaning into spiritual beliefs, taking breaks, going to the gym. These are what practices. There was a question, how can you be present when you have a decision to make that's coming up and there's a deadline and you're feeling anxious?
hmm So, oh, that's a good one, and I'll get more into it in the next part when I talk about the heart. But whenever we are anxious or we're experiencing an emotion, our mind will interpret that based on our past experiences. So, if you have had a deadline before and the way that you reacted to that, you're going to repeat that. And so, whenever you are feeling anxious, the best thing is to bring attention to it. Ask yourself, okay, I'm observing that I'm feeling anxious about this deadline. What is going on for me? What is going on for me for this decision that's coming up? What am I worried about? What is the worst that I think is going to happen? And when you start to ask yourself those questions and you bring that out, you're going to find something. You're going to find something there of like, oh, I'm worried about this not going well because there's a lot relying on this. So this is where we can learn tools to self-coach ourselves of being able to say, okay, now that I observe that I'm being worried, I'm anxious about this decision, how do I want to show up? And it's about making that conscious choice of flipping yourself into the positive of like, when I make this decision, what am I most excited about? When I make this decision, what do I think it's going to lead to? That's going to drive the outcomes that we're striving to create. So if you focus your energy in like all of the wonderful things that are going to result from what you're doing, you're going to start to shift your experience. And that's a way to repeat, sort of that in the future. So you start to build like a new pattern for how you react towards deadlines and making decisions of that nature.
Love that. There is one more question, but I thought I'd chime in that someone once taught me the five whys technique. So it's like, why do I feel this? There's an answer. And then why do I think that? And then why? And you kind of go deeper till you get to actually a root cause, which is usually not what you thought it was at all, but very helpful for self-awareness. So Claire asks a great question. Do you have any tips for neurodivergent people for matching thoughts to actions? I feel I need to occupy my mind to get something done often. So that's a great question. Matching thoughts to actions for neurodivergent folks.
Yeah. So I think the key thing here is that we have to get to know ourselves. So while like, I'm sharing like certain tips and things that we can do, but I've met people that need a background noise or they need to have, something else that's there and that helps them to perform. So I think the key thing here is that it's about leaning in towards yourself of when do you feel at your best? So if you feel like a state of calm and you feel like, okay, if I do these few things, then I'm able to focus, which might not work for other people. It might sound bizarre, but it works for me. Then you got to honor that. You got to go with that because um, because what happens is like our nervous system regulates to whatever we think is normal for us. So as long as you feel good, you feel at your best, you really have to practice and find what works best for you. That doesn't make you feel scattered or doesn't make you feel imbalanced. So that's what's pretty key here.
Yeah, one size fits no one.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Baron, I believe you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's more so like I thought I'm a neurodivergent myself and I always do research on this. Can I give a couple tips? Like I just wanna
Sure.
say. One of the things is that rewarding yourself for starting. So for me, for example, also something called temptation bundling. For example, I like drinking tea when I'm starting something that is kind of like tedious or whatever. I like drinking tea so that I don't feel too meh. It helps with my energy. So other thing is that sometimes the reason we avoid what we want to do, the actions, is because even though it's easy for others, maybe for neurotypicals, it may be harder for a neurodiverse person. So breaking down the task to think like it's like a no-brainer. So when you break it down that much and really like see those steps, it's so much easier. And if you visualize it as well, then it just helps a lot. Like it just makes it easy because especially if you have like ADHD, then one of the things is that out of mind, no, out of sight, out of mind. Visualizing with like using different techniques that work for you. For me, I um like post-its, the Kanban board, a lot of things I use. And like you can look up neurodiverse friendly techniques because not all, sometimes neurotypical friendly motivation or like attention techniques doesn't work for neurodiverse folks. So looking into that can help. But I like how Seema told, like leaning into yourself as in like knowing and looking into self-reflection and what works best for you and using that as another really great way. I like that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Vern. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And so I'm going to move on to the next pillar. And this is the one that I just wanted to make sure we go a little bit further into because of that question that came about being anxious. So so becoming heart-centered. Now, we know we live in a society that has focused on our mind, and what we sort of ignore and leave out is our feelings and our intuition, which is very much a part of ourselves. So, and our feelings and intuition, where does it come from? Well, our heart and our gut. And there's a lot of research around these areas of our body which have actual neural systems like the brain. So the heart has like 40,000 neurons, and our gut has 500 million, which has, of course, a communication system that connects with the brain. Now, the thing is that what's happened in business is like feelings have a bad reputation, or you made a gut feeling, you weren't objective, you didn't look at the data, that was irrational. Well, we've already proven that the mind is very irrational with all of the errors that it can make. But the thing is that feelings and intuition, when we're aware of it, we pay attention to it, it works with our cognition, so it works with our mind. And research shows that our decisions are actually better, they're stronger. We are able to have greater confidence and also less stress when we're making decisions because we are interpreting the data that comes from the heart and the gut. So that is what is heart intelligence. And I like to call it, but we should recognize it as experiential data. So it's not some sort of irrational pieces of information. So what we have to do is, well, one, if we're present and we're able to then listen to that inner voice, and that inner voice, which is not the mind, the inner voice, the true inner voice, it comes from our heart and from our intuition, right? And even if you place your hand on your heart and your stomach, I'm doing that right now, like you feel something different because that is actually where your authentic self, comes out from. And so when we learn to pay attention to this, information from, our heart and our gut, we are able to build better relationships because we're able to have much greater empathy and compassion. We're able to understand different points of view. So what's really important here is that when we're able to be in our heart, be compassionate towards others, we relate with them. And so when we relate with someone, remember how we talked about the brain that does in group, out group, like you're not like me? All of a sudden, when we feel connected to people, we think about them. It comes into our decision making. Otherwise, the brain thinks everyone's a stranger and stranger danger. That's kind of what goes on. So it's very important we, through our heart, feel connections with people, no matter who they are, right? So that allows us to have that empathy. And when we listen to that intelligence that comes from within, we strengthen the relationship with ourself and trust. Now, the thing is, there is a reason why feelings got a bad reputation, and I'll talk about in a small little bit, but when we don't listen to our inner voice, we actually don't trust ourselves and we start to build doubt. And we think like, oh, I listened to my gut before and that didn't go very well for me. I forgot to think about these things, but there's a little bit more that's actually going on here. And so what's happening? Well, we need to understand our feelings because whatever is in our mind, right? So the content of our thoughts actually leads to the emotions we feel. So the thing is, there was like, I think in 100, BC or around that time, there was a Greek philosopher that said that our thinking is basically our feeling. Then there's one more piece is like the way that we're perceiving something, like a situation or an event or anything, how we're perceiving it is influencing how we're feeling. Okay, so that's always going on. And then we act, so our behaviors will align to whatever is the thought and whatever is the feeling. So these three elements are so interconnected, and we can basically shift how we feel just from our thoughts. And that's why it's so powerful to be aware of our thoughts and to be aware of what's, actually happening there. And so, one other thing that we need to think about is, I don't want to go too deep into this, but there's feelings and there's emotions. So, emotions create a physiological response in the body. We all experience the same emotions. However, our feelings are a mental interpretation of the emotion, and our feelings are unique to each one of us. They're unique to our experiences and our beliefs. All of that plays a role to the different feelings we all have. And this is why we need to appreciate that everyone's going to feel in their own way. We can't expect everyone to have the same feelings. And this is where we can, build up our ability to have that greater awareness of our own feelings, but also others. So they can be so unique and so different. And so, how do we become more heart-centered? So, I just want to ask the group here is that have any of you like listened to your intuition and your heart when you made a really important decision, either in your life or in your business? And what did that feel like? Like, what was the experience, if any of you would like to share?
While people are answering that question, let me just slide in another question here that someone had. which directly is about this, which is how does this work? What we're talking about, how does this work in a corporate environment that tends not to be consciously aware, that tends not to invite spiritual, heart-centered type leadership? So just kind of, this is sort of
Yeah.
folded in. I think some people are wondering, okay, this is great, but what if just us on the call believe this? How does this work in a corporate environment?
So hear that, and change happens from each one of us and how we show up. The corporate environment is not fixed. The corporate environment and the culture is a result of everyone there. But as
Yeah.
leaders, if we don't decide to break away from that, if we got to make that choice. Like in our corporate environments, and this is why we need to create this sort of change and shift. And it happens from each one of us. Like a single person can create this change in their organization. You're probably thinking, how can that happen? The C-suite and all the executives have to play a role. So in the course of my career, like I was that person where I did things so differently. And this is now for like 20 years, right? And people would just be like, what is she doing? They wouldn't understand. And just how I would go about things and invite in dialogue. And I at one point was like, you know what? I'm not going to explain what I'm doing anymore because people would show resistance. I'm like, I'm just going to do it. So the way that I approached it was like, we need to create an experience in the company, like when you're developing a strategy, you're doing like a session, you're prototyping a new product, we have to create an experience, and I would thoughtfully design it that way. And so then what I would do is like I would empower people without like the formal titles. Like I didn't care about titles or hierarchy. It was about people and all of the knowledge and insights that they bring. And what I started to do was invite some very, very senior leaders to watch them in action. And the results that they would create was profound. And so this is why we have to break away from the corporate mold, but it starts from us. And I think the key thing is that we need to sometimes be gentle with how we bring it, because I find that leaders can become very defensive. They think it's something that they've done or it's blame, but it has to be like thoughtful around, you know what? The world is so dynamic. Our customers are dynamic, and what we do needs to be more mindful of others. We need to understand how we feel about things because there is importance that we're all heart-centered for alignment. Now, the thing is, a lot of leaders in big corporations are comfortable with purpose now. They get purpose. And so now we have to say that, okay, purpose is great. Purpose is wonderful, but what is purpose? What is purpose activating? It's activating engagement because it aligns something in our heart. And so one part of it is getting leaders comfortable with that and taking steps to infuse it in. So sometimes like I
Mhm.
can with an organization get a sense of their culture, and I'll take baby steps. And it's about building on those baby steps, but it's like if we can invoke an experience in the senior leaders, that's enough to convince them because they don't know any better sometimes. They just keep repeating on repeat. They're overstretched. So they're just going to do what's comfortable. They think change is hard. No, we're not going to change the culture. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. So they'll do everything the hard way, waste money. They think that's good because we always do it like that way. We have these frameworks. We paid those consultants to develop them. But it's like, no, 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 no. You're not using the power of your people. They have all the answers.
Yeah, and that word power came through in the answers to your question here, which is, have you used your heart and gut to make decisions? So people are saying it's empowering. Someone says I've learned I must listen to my intuition, or the decision doesn't feel aligned. Yogita says, I tend to go with my logic mind instead of my gut feelings, and I'm unsure how to reconnect with my intuition. So there's another question. If we have a propensity to lean towards the logic instead of gut, how do we make that shift? Maybe that's still coming.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully we get there at the end of this conversation, but to practice intuition, because like, yes, one point in my life, a super analytical person, so in my head and very like, you can give me any problem to solve and I'll do it, just very like head strengths, but what we need to do is like it's that self-trust. And so if you start making small things with your intuition, like for example, say on Friday night, you say to yourself, what do I feel like doing? And whatever is the first thing that comes to your mind, you do it. What do I feel like eating? You do it. What am I going to wear today? You do it. It's those ideas, it's not your mind, it's actually coming from your intuition. So when you lean into what do I feel like, you start to open that part out. And sometimes it's about establishing little practices like being like, okay, I am present. I'm going to ground myself. Maybe you want to listen to meditation music, go outside in nature, come back down and feel like a sense of normal. And you can even, like I said, put your hand on your heart and be like, okay, what do I feel? And you lean into that, lean into whatever feeling that comes up, right? There's usually a feeling and sensation. Just allow it to come and you nurture that. And you keep practicing that. And that's how we can build our trust with our intuition. So I'm just going to go over a couple of these things that are here, and maybe that will also help as well of things that affect listening to our intuition and heart. And that's negative feelings. So when we have negative feelings inside, it actually really biases our decisions. So this is why gut feelings and all of that got a bad reputation because, yeah, we sometimes make decisions when we're not in a good mood, when we're upset. And all of those decisions are not going to be good because there's a lot of stress going on for ourselves and we'll make poor choices. So it's really, really important that we regulate our emotions. Our emotions, like I said, is a physiological part of ourself. Our nervous system regulates that. So however your emotions are that you carry every day, your nervous system develops what's called set points, and we think that's normal. And so we'll function like that. So it's really important that if we have something going on for ourselves, that we check in with ourselves. When we spot stress, worry, fear, just bring loving kindness to it. Why do I feel this way? Observe your thoughts. Don't judge them, just observe. See what comes up for yourself. And something that we don't do enough is we don't self-inquire. Like, how often do we ask ourselves, how am I doing? Just, how am I doing today? And sometimes I ask myself that question a lot. If I catch myself sort of off, I'm like, how am I doing today? And that simple question something will come out like, okay, I'm starting to feel a bit stressed. Okay, why am I feeling stressed? And that is very powerful. And we all have that capability to do that. And so I briefly touched on this that we have to pay attention to signals coming from the heart and the body. So these are sensations, right? So, for example, you're cold, you put on a sweater, you're hungry, so you feel that you eat. And it's the same thing from our heart. There'll be little things. So, for example, sometimes you might feel a pain in your shoulder. If you bring attention to that pain, what is it? Why is it there? And it's usually some sort of stress or tension that's building up that you've been ignoring. And the body does that. The body will do those things. But there's also instances when your body feels really good. You're relaxed, you're open, and things are flowing. And those are signals from your body saying, hey, this is great. It's signals from your heart saying, this is very good. I like this. And so pay attention to that. That's an easy way to understand the signals. Are you contracting? Are you tense? Or are you open? And it's very amazing of how your body will just do that naturally. And that's how we can discern our intuition and our heart of where it's coming from. So I'm just mindful of time, so I'm just going to quickly move on now to the next few pillars, just so we have some time to bring this all together. So the next pillar is staying interconnected. So we all feel like we're individuals, we're all separate, but we're actually all connected. Everything in life and nature, like we're all interconnected, but in the business world, we don't see it that way, right? And as a result of that, like we make decisions without considering the impact on others, but also it's the nature of our thoughts, our emotions, and how we feel that comes into decisions that creates an impact on everyone that's around us. So there's actually quite a ripple effect that comes from each one of us into your communities, into your organization. and into the world. And something that's really key here about interconnectedness is that we need to pay attention to the relationship that we have in our inner world, how it relates to the external world, and the way that how we perceive the external world comes back to us. Because as I mentioned before, we are a mirror. So whatever we observe and we perceive and see, some of that comes from just ourselves, our internal world. So there's a really critical, strong relationship there. So if there's something you believe and you want to see, you'll see it, and you'll ignore everything else. So it's really important that we learn to understand the impacts of our thoughts, our emotions. It plays that role in decision making. And we surface our beliefs. Now, some of the beliefs are going to come to mind. You're going to be like, yes, these are my beliefs. I'm aware of it. But there's a lot of it that we don't know. It only comes out once you question yourself of what's important to me. Where is this coming from? Sometimes our ideas and what we have is actually not a result of us. It comes from the outside world. Everything seeps into our unconscious mind. So it might not even be your idea. So it's really critical we surface this because it can block your decisions when it comes to taking risks, to finding new opportunities. If you're not aware, you're always going to revert to those automatic patterns that are there. So how do we become more interconnected and practice that? Very easily, we can ask for different points of view, different opinions to come in. Observe conversation. So if you notice some people aren't speaking, find a way to get them to participate so that, the more voices that come in, the better, greater richness of the information. And this next one here, it's really important to share assumptions. So whenever we're running projects or working on some key things, we make a lot of assumptions and we never ever identify them. But in a group setting or in a team, if you identify, like, hey, these are our shared assumptions, this is how we think things are going to work, and this is why, this is what we believe. And as you work and move along, things might change. But at least then you can say, hey, our assumptions change. This is not what happened. And it ends up being a great learning experience. And of course, creating some decision-making processes where it makes you think about the environments that you're in. It makes you think about your stakeholders, how you impact them, and how you relate to them. And lastly, it's understanding the ecosystem that you're in. So the way you can think about this is like a plant in the Amazon rainforest. It's actually connected to so many different ecosystems. And that one plant plays such a key role in all of that. So if you think about yourself like that in your personal life, but also professionally, and it's about identifying what ecosystems am I a part of? And it's all to expand our perception so that we can use that to help inform our decision making. And so the next pillar is feeling the future. And so when we're making decisions about next year or 5 years from now, it becomes harder and harder. And there's a reason for that. So, we tend to do a lot of short-term thinking for now or like the next year. We also create so many goals, which ends up diluting what we do. And of course, what we've been chatting about, we stay too focused in our mind and we don't use all parts of ourselves. So what happens then is that when we try to think about the future for ourselves, our companies, and so on, it's hard and it creates stress. And the reason is the brain loathes uncertainty. It hates it. It doesn't like the element of surprise. The brain is likes to predict. It's always predicting what's going to happen in the next moment. And so when we think about the future, it's hard because we don't have any long-term memory for the future. Future hasn't happened. And so as a result, decision making is extremely difficult. This is where, you make decisions, things change. You're like, oh, we shouldn't have done that. We should have done this way. And so what we need to do is we need to actually experience the future. We actually need to be able to create it, visualize it, simulate it. And as a result of that, we create memories. So then the brain has something, you have insight that helps you when you make decisions. And the next part of it is that in alignment with thinking about that future is setting intentions. So intentions are powerful because they focus on being, like what is the experience going to be like? So we end up connecting emotions and feelings along with how we're thinking about the future. And that actually allows us then to be able to make better decisions because we have something to go on. If it's not there, then it ends up being habitual patterns. And what's really fascinating here is that the brain doesn't know any different. So when you really visualize like an event and a situation, maybe it's for yourself where you're going to take your business or your career and you feel it and you're in it, you have a very vivid view of it. The brain doesn't know the difference between whether that's real or not, whether it's actually happening. And this is why visualizations are so powerful because once again, you're creating the memories in your mind that you can then use. And then on the intention setting of how that relates is that intentions, as I said, connect to your feelings and your emotions. And intentions actually encode in your brain in one part of it when you set an intention. And when you action it, it triggers another area. So, this is where getting into the practice of setting intentions is really powerful because it serves as reminders. Either it's in your day or in your week, it could be for a project, it could be for a new business idea, whatever intention you set, it basically serves to help you and support you in aligning with that and making aligned decisions to that. And so, intention setting, I do it every day. I do it every day for how I want my day to go. I do it at the beginning of every week. Sometimes I do it at the beginning of every month. You can do it for, like I said, a goal, a strategy. It is very powerful because goals are about doing, intentions are about being, and we need to pair both with visualizations, and that's what will enable stronger decision making. So I'll just take a quick pause here and just see if anyone has any questions about that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of great comments. Yogita's has a question. She says, I was told by my leadership to be a decisive leader instead of asking the input of staff, which was my innately style of leadership. Sounds like Seema, you kind of operated that way as well. So she is saying, how would you reconcile this duality if you're being told to be a decision maker and yet you feel to include the input of others?
Yeah, so I think it's like, standing in your own authenticity because if you ask people for their input, that that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a decisive leader. A decisive leader, decisiveness is being able to make a decision with clarity. So if you're able to make that decision with clarity and you're not humming and hawing, you are a decisive leader. And I think it's about coming back to your leadership about, understanding that you're aware of what decisiveness is, but powerful decisions come from gaining input from others, right? It comes from expanding perception, expanding the points of view, because not there's no person in the world that can understand everything. It's just not possible. So I think it's about showcasing, demonstrating that when we value voices, we enrich the information that we use for much more powerful decision making. And that is true leadership. And what unfortunately, some corporate folks, they're really stuck, and I talk about this in my book, they're really stuck in like the 20th century. It's very much command and control. The leader is the big boss. The leader makes the decision. Everyone follows along. That's just not the way anymore. And so, those old structures is what needs to be abolished. And we need to flow into this different, sort of better way of being. Because once again, it's like everyone has rich expertise and experience, and that leads to stronger, better, more effective decision making. But it's just a matter of being efficient while you do it, right? And it's not about teeter-tottering, but it's about, nope, I am, getting information for these individuals for this reason. This is what they have identified. These were the observations. I'm using that to inform my decision making, which is going to make it better and stronger.
I love that. And what I'm hearing you talk about is the decision-making process, and probably everyone has a slightly different process. I think the key here is we're not delaying the decision. That's important. Like you said, we're not waffling, we're not teeter-tottering, we're being allowing ourselves to be like pulled in all directions. We still have a deadline. We make a decision by that deadline. To me, the process is our own, and there's all sorts of processes. Baron, maybe you wanted to ask a question or weigh in on this.
Yeah, no, I think you're actually very much right. Like maybe when people hear heart and stuff, they think like, oh, it's like a meditation stuff. I'm like, eh, you know. But the truth is, this is actually very much supported with science. What you're saying is basically letting like the community, the people who are making with the changes, let them be part of the change, so they feel more empowered. They feel more powered, like they feel like more responsibility and engagement, basically. From what I'm hearing from you, can like correct me if I'm wrong, but this is actually shown to be more effective. Before in the even the organizational psychology, from what I hear, was they were just focusing on customer happiness. But when they started focusing on the like workers' happiness, which is kind of what you're doing, I think, uh, the productivity, the money making, all those got increased like a crazy level. And this is what you are mentioning from what I hear. It's just a different way of framing. Like you just use the word heart instead of saying in terms of organizational psychology this and that. But actually the research very much supports you and you use the research. I think it's just more so that some people certain words may feel like triggering or like they may feel like it's invalidating for them. So the words we choose when we are like talking to them can just impact, because I can see how like intentional, but at the same time you're using both research and your experience and all those things together. I mean, it's just my observation. Like I said, it's just I like research a lot and psychology in terms of like behavioral psychology. But yeah, I think that is what it is. Even for Yogita, maybe the way she can like frame it can be when I ask the input of staff, I can see increased engagement and better results and quality improvement compared to when I just tell them what to do and they may be stalling or may not be the best. But this is just my observation. So I know you're like the expert, but I just wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you, Baron. And you're right. Like all of this is backed by science, and that was really important to me to ground all of this because the other thing that I've done is like asking input from staff, but I also did that with customers. So I was leading this huge, change of a new credit card platform and changing the loyalty rewards program for cardholders. And I asked my team, like, you know what? We need to go out to the customers. We need to ask them, like, what do they think? How do they feel about this? How do they feel about the new login process? Do they like the app? And of course, there's pressure of like, Seema, hurry up, Seema, get the deadlines. And I was like, no, this is really important. And so we went out, my team went out, talked to customers, got all the feedback, and came in. And then we found out their biggest concern was data privacy. Biggest concern was like how they saw certain information. Also, too much technical language. Like, what does this stuff even mean? It had to be simple and clear. So we used all of their feedback and it changed everything. And so this is where it's like we don't have all the answers. We never can. And yeah, so thank you, Baron, for that. So I'm just going to move on to the next one, and then we're just really close to like wrapping things up and putting it all together. So the last pillar we have here is thinking with abundance. So in our mind, how the brain is like we have a lot of mindsets. We have so many mindsets that we're unable to count how many mindsets and things like that we have because it's connected to something called mental models. And these are deeply held assumptions which orient us to the way we understand the world. And these mental models build over time. And so, what's really important about our mindset is that, like I said, it really adjusts our perception to the way that we're like perceiving something. And one of the mindsets to be very, very mindful of is the scarcity mindset. This is pretty much what the world is built upon, it's everywhere. So, this is not enough money, not enough time, not enough resources, always focusing on the constraints. And this is ingrained in a lot of business practices, right? It's constantly there. And the thing is that our brain has a lot of defensive circuits, and that's just the way nature did it. So we have to be really conscious about shifting our thinking. And this is where the abundance mindset is really powerful because the abundance mindset is looking at the multitude of opportunities, potential, limitless potential. And when we focus on that, we actually are more creative. We have less stress and negative emotions that come up because we're not worried. Because the scarcity mindset creates a lot of fear and a lot of worry. The abundance mindset creates a lot of freedom. And if you just think about, like, for example, the universe, quantum possibilities, anything can happen. It leads to that much greater creative and innovative thinking. And it also allows us to think about the long term. And what's really important here is, like, I put here, thinking of a lock creates more lock. And it's true, because that's what we're putting out on a daily basis. And that's what the brain picks up and finds. So you keep reinforcing that with yourself. And so thoughts of lack could be, even like, I'm not good enough. I always struggle. I'm not going to succeed. My business isn't doing well. And it's just focusing on all of those, very much those negative things. But to create the abundance mindset, we're able to do that by changing the structure in our brain, which is amazing that we can do that. And so there's a few ways that we can think with abundance. Some of you might be aware of, like, gratitude practices. Now, what gratitude practices do is, like, they encourage our mind to look for things that are positive and to be grateful for. So when we start doing this, we start finding more things that we're grateful for. And what's really powerful about this, it can be really small things. Like when Carrie and I jumped on Zoom, we were just talking about sometimes things in nature that are just, like, I was talking about cherry blossoms in Vancouver. I took it for, granted, but those are things that I'm just grateful for, things that are there in nature. And that helps our mind then find other things that, we can be grateful for. And it doesn't have to be big things. It can be really small things, appreciating the beautiful sunshine, appreciating all of the small things. It helps to change and create pro circuits in the brain, which is very important to making decisions without stress and worry and fear. Positive affirmations. So I am statements. It's not just saying I am content, I am successful. You got to really believe it, because I am statements, like, are important because our unconscious mind is listening to that. It's like programming. It's like putting new programming in. So that's something that I find can be quite powerful. We've already talked about meditation. Breath work, cold baths, anything that resets your nervous system. So once again, this is connected with the set points that we talked about earlier, that our body will regulate to whatever feels normal. So sometimes for people, I know for myself in the past, the state of stress of being in fight or flight, that was literally my state of normal, which led to eventually burnout several years later. So this is really important that we can engage the nervous system in a reset, and that actually helps us to build a much better abundance mindset. And of course, there's small actions that you can do that help you achieve things. And the simple act of saying thank you. So when you say thank you to someone, you're building those pro circuits in your brain. But whoever is receiving that thanks, you're actually helping them to build an abundance mindset. And so I find in organizations, sometimes we don't say thank you. It's an expectation, like that's your role, that's your job, you're doing your job, and you just don't get a thank you. So that's something to just such a small thing we can, keep in our mind that, someone, did something for us, to just say, hey, thank you, I really appreciate that. And you're building that abundance mindset in them. So powerful. And the last one here, which is very, very powerful as well, is reframing your thoughts. This is where we are all so capable. We have the ability to, if we have something that we're thinking, like if you constantly have like a thought in your mind, like, I'm not good at this, I'm not going to succeed, my career is stuck here, and you notice that you're doing that, you have an opportunity to say, hey, okay, where is this thought coming from? Why do I believe this? Usually a lot of things trace into our childhood, like I said, the 0 to 7, the developmental years, but also whenever we have profound emotional experiences, it encodes in ourselves, right? And that's where beliefs come from and they get built. But when you uncover what that is, then you can make a conscious choice. How do I want to think? How do I want to think about my career? How do I want to think about my business? How do I want to think about growth? Yes, I observe it's a mucky world. Yes, I observe there's challenges in the external environment, but how do I want to think about how I'm going to go forward in my work, in my business? Those are all conscious choices that you can make, and you can reframe your thoughts to that and practice that. And in time, that is how you will think. So I'm just gonna sort of bring this all together and then we'll open it up for like dialogue and questions. Is that, we talked a lot about the mind, our unconscious self, the conscious mind, our heart, our intuition, and how these elements are a part of who we are. And so everything starts with awareness, right? Awareness is really powerful. Consider it like a flashlight. It illuminates things that we want to see. So if you think about it in that way, like as soon as you shed light on something, you see it for everything that it is. And using heart intelligence, that's when you're really stepping into your full power, right? Getting used to tuning into your heart, getting used to, okay, I'm going to listen to this deep inner feeling and I'm going to honor what's there and using that with your critical thinking. You're really aligning and integrating that. And that's all what this is about. You're aligning and integrating these parts of yourself that are there and that are very critical, important. And then whenever you're making decisions, slow down. That is the best thing to do. And so even though you have that pressure from bosses, leaders about, it's so funny. Like often I would hear, oh, wow, those decisions were made so quick. Oh, that's so impressive. And I'm like, I don't think that's impressive. Like making quick decisions doesn't mean it's an effective and good decision. It's the outcome that's most important. And, I would say, and I had a great mentor who'd always say that slowing down is actually speeding up because you make less errors, you make less mistakes, and you make more informed and enriched decisions. So whenever you slow down, you're bringing forward your conscious, deliberate self. And you can even say that. You can just tune everything out, all that noise, all that extra pressure, and say, I'm going to focus on this decision and I'm going to slow down and that will engage your conscious self. And just a point here that I want to make is that all of these habitual patterns that we have in ourselves that are in the unconscious that affect our decision making and so forth is that understanding it all takes time. And this is where I have a real pet peeve with some people out there that are quite big that will put on, workshops and conferences that change your life in 90 days. I don't believe it. Yes, you can improve your life in 90 days or your business, but this takes time. This takes ongoing work. And this is where consciousness is a daily practice. It's daily development that you are doing that builds your best self and your highest potential. And whenever you recognize something in yourself and you make a change, you're like, nope, this is how I want to think, or this is how I want to shift what I believe, you're making transformational shifts. And those transformational shifts will help you be a better leader. It will help you, fulfill your own self. And that will help you lead your business and make those better decisions because you are constantly evolving and elevating your consciousness. And my last point here that I just want to say is that, yes, the world is very complex. Like every day I open the news headlines, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening today? And it can start to feel really heavy. And so this is where we have to practice becoming the observer. So those of you that do meditation are quite aware of this, of like, how do we observe what's happening with sort of non-judgmental attitude and just to see what's there. And when we learn to observe, that means we're not absorbing what's happening, where we're pulling it into our consciousness, where it's dragging us down. And it's like you can be aware of what's happening and have your own boundaries, your values, and what you believe in, but you're not going to get caught up in the muck, right? So it's like not going down the bunny hole of all these issues and problems and getting sucked into it. So it affects your emotions and your feelings and all of that. So the more we can observe and say, I notice this, I observe that, the better off that we can be. So that concludes our session today, and we'll move into questions. But I just wanted to say here that if you would like to reach out to me, if you have a question or you want to chat, here is my contact information, my email, danoa.seema@gmail.com. And on LinkedIn and Instagram, you can follow me and find me under Seema Dhanoa. And of course, my book is available everywhere books are sold. And if you want more detail and information about things that I talked about, it's definitely in my book. Highly recommended as a resource to have. Keep it on your desk because this is, I did this to help people, right? To help leaders. So we can, create a better world because it happens through each one of us, our consciousness. We can make a tremendous impact. So I'm just going to
Thank
stop,
you.
sharing my
Thank you for
screen.
that, Seema. Baron is asking, is it as an audiobook? I don't believe it is at this point, is it?
Not
Yeah.
yet. I would like to have an audiobook, but to be honest, it's just financial reasons. Like I just was unable at this time to have an audiobook, so
Yeah,
I
no
hope
problem.
that can
Yeah.
come.
So we do have a few minutes left. I don't know if anyone else has a question or a comment. Just such amazing food for thought here today, that's for sure. I love the thoughts that were given around that swift decision making that you were talking about. And Claire was talking about shock change always falls apart, right? That absolutely, I saw that and I concur. I know, it makes sense. Sometimes we are under deadlines and there's high pressure situations, but in an ideal world, we would like to, maybe have thought processes. Ishita's asking, what does making decisions with abundance look like for you, Seema?
hmm So so whenever I'm making a decision and such, one of the things that I really practice and I understand is that, and I mentioned this before, is that what we think is reality and real is not in its entirety. I know that there's infinite possibilities, and this is where I had to limit the scope of my book because our consciousness transcends time and space, right? It's like this is where, we have the unconscious, we have the conscious, and we have the superconscious, which probably to focus in my next book later in life. But what I always think about in terms of abundance is that if I am authentic to myself, how can I use my talents or how can I make choices that is going to result in creating a positive impact for people? That's usually what's always at the heart of my decisions because it's not about myself, but it's about how can I help to create change and shift. In my mind, I always hold a view of the possibility for our planet and people of what the world could look like. What is the potential that's there? And in the world that I imagine in my mind, we don't have these divides. We don't have all of this hate. We have compassion, we have cooperation, we have abundance, we have, new industries and businesses because we're not focusing on the old industrial ways. We have greater harmony with nature. And we are able to live in that way of like balance and more love and more joy. So I always think about that in my mind of like, that's what I'm striving to create. So how can I make a decision that leads to that?
Beautifully said. I love that. Claire has a situational question for you. She says she works in libraries in the United States who are often working in serious financial lack and providing the world to their patrons. She'd love to help them to think with abundance, to bring creativity to how they're able to use their budgets or find grants, etc. So, do you have any tips for motivating others in these sectors that might be in lack? And there are a lot of those or might
Yeah.
be perceived as being in luck. Maybe they're not in luck. I don't know.
Yeah, so the thing about resources available, where people go wrong and challenges, like that's their starting point. So as soon as you bring that as your starting point, like, okay, we only have $10,000 available, what can we do? You're already in the scarcity mindset. So what is best is not to focus on the resources. That's not part of the conversation when you're starting off. So when you start off the conversation, you start it off with ideas about what is it that you want to achieve? What are the outcomes? What are the possibilities and what does that look like? And you have to um, stop folks from wanting to critique, analyze. That's not what it's about. It's about unearthing possibilities and what you can do. And so when you start to do that, people will come up with ideas that they never thought possible. And eventually you can refine those ideas, and it could be something nobody ever thought of. And the thing is that eventually, when you get to the point of like putting costs at the very end, you've already gone through this process where you might have discovered something that is inexpensive, that actually does fit your budget. But the whole point is not to start there. So I have a really good example in my book about Levi's. Like, the fashion industry is the most polluting in this world. Like, the amount of water to wash a pair of jeans is like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. And considering half the world experiences some form of like water scarcity in some point of the year, Levi's water is scarce, right? And so Levi's didn't start off with that. What Levi's did was told their people, I want you to think of new ways of how can we make our jeans? That was the question. So people were empowered to come up with their own ideas. How could we make new jeans? How could we do this differently? And they ended up creating low water use denim washes. And so they found a way to completely restrict their water use. And that's how they were able to create this new model in different parts of the world where they have water scarcity, because it was about empowerment and it was about allowing people, giving them the space to say, hey, I want you to think differently. Don't look at the way we do things now. Come up with a completely new, innovative way. And so that is usually what leads to the best ideas that actually conserves and saves, and you make use of what you have and create maximum outcome.
I love that idea. And as small business owners, one thing, if I can chime in, one thing I see that we often will do is the more that we are interconnected, and you did mention that, getting new ideas, new perspectives, is that we realize, hey, there's this whole concept of resource sharing. So I might have something that you can borrow, whether that's skills or access to an asset. Some people have venues, and so like there's an ability to resource share, even though our own resources might be somewhat limited or scarce, quote unquote. There is an abundance when we start to connect with community, because like, oh my gosh, it's absolutely limitless when it comes to that. And then what you said also made me think of Google, which was, I guess it's to Claire's point. Obviously, Google's highly innovative, and they have the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time you're working on your project, 20% you're playing, you're experimenting. And I'm sure they have, parameters within that. But without that creativity of thought, how will we land on the low water gene washing cycle? We'll just be stuck in our old thought patterns, which goes back to your original point.
That's excellent, Carrie.
Love that. Okay, seeing no further questions, I am going to say let us close it here for today. Thank you, Seema, for taking the time to spend with us. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Check out the book, and I did drop into the Zoom chat that this workshop will be on our YouTube channel later today. If you can't find it, just reach out to me. I'll get you a link to the YouTube channel. And of course, we do have one or two more workshops coming up. The next one is What's Next for WeCan. If you're a regular WeCan member, please do be there. It's going to be some exciting news to hear. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, Seema, and thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic day. Take
Thank
care.
you, everyone. Take
Bye.
care.